Hi friends, Joshua here. Just wanted to show you a little bit today how to use an ephemeris in a very basic way, but this is going to help you to move forward in astrology and take a step toward more advanced practices within astrology. Now, I'm in astro.com. I have signed in. I have gone to my astro. I have clicked on my birth data. I'm not showing you the whole list because that would violate the privacy of hundreds of people that are that are in my account. So this is just in my own astro data. Normally, this would be the step where we would click on extended chart selection and draw up the kind of chart that we want. Instead, today we're going to click on create an ephemeris. Now, of course, you do have the option to just click here to show ephemeris, and this is going to show you the planetary positions for the year of 2020. But the time zone here is Greenwich Mean Time, basically, which is sort of used as the universal time zone for Eurocentric Western folks. But that doesn't really help us because these aren't the planetary positions for me because I don't live in Greenwich Mean Time. So let's look a little bit more specifically. Let's go back to our selection page. And I'm first going to show you how to do this for a birth chart because that's something that you already know. You already know what your birth positions are. You already know what that looks like. So you can check your work against that. And then I'm going to show you how to do it for transits and horoscopes, which will be useful in the future, useful information moving forward. Okay, so first of all, to get a birth chart, you need to put in your birth year because that's the ephemeris for the year that you were born. And you might be saying, why do I have to go to all this work when a computer can just do it for me? The reason is that this is good practice for other kinds of work where, yes, the computer could do it for you, but when you want to see the movement of the planets over time, it's a lot harder to get a computer to do that for you. So this is going to help you move past the limited vision that's possible with a computer. Okay, so Ephemerides. 1990, the year I was born, and I'm going to use show time data in time zone of reference place. That's super important because that's the place I was born. I know that because in my default settings, reference place is birthplace. We're going to come back to that in a minute. Okay, click here to show ephemeris. Here is an ephemeris for the year 1990, and you'll see time zone of Stoughton, Massachusetts, my birthplace there as the reference place. Great. So here we are. I was born in January. I was born on the 19th. So that is that. And basically, this is all the information you need to cast your birth chart except for your ascendant. You're going to need to do a different calculation to get your ascendant with the date and time. And you can do that with the information given in the ephemeris, but that's one thing where I don't usually bother because that's the ascendant moves so quickly that you don't need to see that for most things that you do astrologically, like how the ascendant is changing over time. So I don't bother to calculate that from the ephemeris. I just use a computer for that part. But everything else is here and worth looking at. The day is Friday. It's kind of cool. I like that I was born on a Friday. In Kabbalistic astrology, that's the day of, in Yetziratic astrology specifically, or Zoharic astrology specifically, Saturn is the Friday planet, not Venus. So that's kind of interesting to me because Saturn is super important in my chart. And then we're going to skip the sidereal time column for a moment and see the position of the sun here. Now here you're just given a degree and you don't see what sign the sun is in. So you're going to look up the column and you see the first glyph of an astrological sign here at the top of the column. The sun is in Capricorn. So going back to my line, that means that the sun is in Capricorn at the 28th degree, 51st minute and 13th second. Minutes and seconds, excuse me, is how we talk about those other numbers after the degree number. And sometimes that will matter. Okay. You can also see that my moon is in Scorpio. Now, here is a situation where you want to double check this against your specific ephemeris, the ephemeris that was drawn for your birth chart, because if the moon moved into Scorpio on the day I was born, then we don't know from this chart because it's just a chart. It's a chart for noon, basically, in the time zone I was born in. So it's not the chart for the time I was born. So the question is, I was born at 1:15 a.m. So the question is, was the moon already in Scorpio or not? Now, the answer is yes, the moon was already in Scorpio, but I know that from my birth chart, not from this ephemeris. Again, there's calculations you can do. The velocity of the moon is very constant. Like you can do a calculation that will get you to the answer. But now that I say that, I'm not so sure that the moon actually moves through the sky at a constant speed. I think it really depends on what latitude you're at in the world. So again, there's certain things that will be much easier to just do with a computer. There's other things that you want to see this ephemeris for. So that's going to be a situation where we're going to want to look at the chart itself. Okay, Mercury is here in, looking up the line, Capricorn, and it is retrograde. The top line of the column tells us when a planet is retrograde, and when a planet is retrograde, it displaces the zodiacal glyph down one line. So same thing over here. Venus is in the 28th degree of what? Capricorn, because that's the next glyph up. But if we keep moving up, we realize, oh, what's this? It was in Aquarius before it was in Capricorn. Well, that's because it's retrograde, and that's up at the top line. Now, if you want to make sure you're looking at the correct range of positions, you can scroll down your chart and see, here we go. On February 8th, 1990, here we go, Venus turned direct, we should say. And so, yes, we're in the proper range. We're sure that it was retrograde on the 19th of January. Great. Mars position, 22nd degree of, look up, Sagittarius. It is direct. Otherwise, we would have an R somewhere in there. And also, from the numbers. I mean, the numbers for Venus in the Venus column are going down, which means that Venus is in retrograde motion. I mean, that's something else that you can see in the ephemeris. Okay, Jupiter, it is retrograde in Cancer. We get that from the top of the column here, but also because, look, the numbers are going down. We're moving from 257 to 250 on the next day. Jupiter is definitely retrograde. Okay, Saturn is in direct motion here because we're moving from 1745 to 1752, and we're doing that in, look up, Capricorn. Great. Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto, all in direct motion here. Capricorn, Scorpio for those outer planets. We're going to kind of skip over those, but that's kind of interesting to note that they're also grouped in with all the other things in my chart. And here are the nodes of the moon. Now, these two numbers are not the north and south node, these two columns. I want you to look up here for a second. They are both the north node, but the first one is the true node. It's where the node actually is in the sky. And the second node is the mean node. Now, the reason why we have two different calculations for the north node of the moon is that the node actually wobbles very, very quickly. And so you'll see from this column, you can't just highlight a column, I guess. You'll see from this column that it goes retrograde and turns direct, retrograde, turns direct faster than any other body in the solar system. It's also not a body, so that kind of makes sense. This is literally showing you the wobble of the poles of the moon, and so not the poles, excuse me, the nodes of the moon, which are the extremes of its orbit. So this is a point that wobbles a lot, and in reality, it goes retrograde more than it goes direct, so that over time, on average, the nodes of the moon are actually moving backward throughout space. And so to show you that, and to make things a little bit simpler and life easier, we have a mean node. That's the north node of the moon without the T inside of it. And this is always retrograde. The numbers are always going down because it's the average of the node's movement. And so that's going backward through the sky, retrograde always, and its positions are a little bit more smoothly moving, whereas the numbers of the true node are a little bit more wobbly and intense. And so I like to use true node for birth charts because that's where the node actually is. And then I use mean node when I'm looking at a chart over time because there's no point in giving a new reading for every wobble of the moon. I mean, maybe it would be interesting. There's enough time. I mean, it goes back and forth about every week. So there's enough time in the middle there where you can make some comment about that. But sometimes when we when we make comments about astrological positions, they get overblown and made too important. And the wobble of the North Node is not super important. So we want to be careful with that. Now I'm going to stop blabbing on and just say that that's the distinction, is I use true node for natal charts and mean node for horoscopes and things like that, generally speaking. Okay, so now at the end, the day repeats, because this is, by the way, this is Ceres and Chiron, which I don't usually use in my astrological readings, and then the day repeats just for an easy reference point. Now you can print this out and use a ruler to see very easily what is on the same line as what. Otherwise, it looks so overwhelming. It's just a list of numbers, so you need to pull out a ruler to make this make sense. You'll also notice that there's a little bit of visual aid in that each week has a little bit more space from the previous and then the following week, and so you have each week kind of blocked out as its own unit, which is very helpful, especially if you're going to do horoscopes by week, for example. Okay, let's go back to our selection page now. What if I want to know where the planets are now, but in reference to my birthplace? So I'm going to put 2020 back in here, but I'm still going to have this checked. Show time data in time zone of reference place. And that's in reference to my birthplace. And I still live in the same time zone, so that's going to work for me. I'm going to click here to show the ephemeris. I'm going to go down to the time it is right now, which is May 19th of 2020. So I know that at noon today in my time zone, this is where the planets are going to be. We have the sun in Taurus. We have the moon in Aries. We have the Mercury. We have Mercury in Gemini. Now you can't go all the way up to the top all the time because look, it changed sign earlier this last week. So we now know that the Mercury is why do I keep saying that? The Mercury in Gemini. It's also direct. With Mercury, you're going to definitely want to check because it goes retrograde at least 3 times a year. Okay. Venus is retrograde. It just went retrograde on the 13th, and it's in Gemini. We know that up here. Okay, back down to May 19th here. I'm glad that the ephemeris also tells me it's Tuesday because sometimes I lose track of what day it is. Okay, now we have Mars in Pisces. We have Jupiter here, retrograde, turned retrograde on Tuesday last week, so just a week ago. Jupiter retrograde in Capricorn. Okay. Saturn is retrograde, also went retrograde last week. What a fun week that was. And that is in Aquarius. Okay. But now the question is, hey, if it's retrograde in Aquarius and these numbers are very close to 0, then that means it's going to move back into Capricorn, isn't it? So we can actually scroll down here and, oh, there it is. That's the day. It moves into Capricorn on July 2nd. Cool. Okay. Actually, yeah, that's right. July 2nd. Okay, cool. So that's how we're going to read the present positions for today. And it's also how we're going to read the positions for tomorrow. So if I want to write a horoscope for tomorrow, I'm going to use the next line. This means that you can get the positions for any day. And you're going to write your horoscope based on noon for your time zone. Now you might say, Joshua, what if you don't live in your time zone anymore? Okay, you have some options if you don't live in the time zone of your birth anymore. You can still do reference birthplace, and a lot of people just do this because it really depends on your philosophy, right? If you think that your relationship with the planets is bound for all time to your birthplace, then you will use your birthplace for your horoscopes. If you do not think that your horoscope, that your relationship with the planets is bound to your birthplace for all time, then you will not use your birthplace, and you're going to click Modify Data to change that. So here in Change Reference Place, it gives you a little bit of sound advice. While nearly all horoscopes are based on the birthplace, some special techniques might need an additional place of reference, which usually is the place where the horoscope owner lives. If it is not entered here, the place of birth will be used in all horoscopes which require this additional reference place. So they're saying, hey, most people just use the birthplace, so you're welcome to use the birthplace. This is the easiest option. We're about to move into complication land. But if you want, you can uncheck use birthplace and hit continue. Then let's say I have moved to New York City. No, that's not going to work. I need a different time zone. Let's say that I move to London. So I'm going to put in Great Britain, London, England, and hit continue. This brings me back to the Ephemeris selection place and shows us here reference place is London. So now when I click to show Ephemeris and I go down to today, it's the 19th, the positions are going to be very, very slightly different. Now you might say, Joshua, if they're going to be very, very slightly different, who cares? Well, here's who cares. People you're writing horoscopes for will care. I used to think it didn't matter, and I used to just use Greenwich Mean Time because that is the astrological standard. And then I was writing horoscopes for a while, and when I was doing that, my clients complained to me and said, Joshua, your horoscopes are very accurate, but it seems like they're a day off. The things that you say I'm going to need to focus on or think about, or the energy that will be present for that day, seems to be the next day after you say, I'm going to experience that. And so I'm just wondering if there has been an error in calculation around the time. And there was. I was using Greenwich Mean Time. As soon as I switched to using my time zone where my clients lived, all of that shifted. And their horoscopes were accurate to the day instead of the next day. So it does matter because those positions will sometimes be slightly off for the time zone that you're reading, and that will tend to move your interpretation sometimes even to the next day of where it should be. So that's why that matters. However, use this with discretion. I use this. I prefer to cast horoscopes for people in their birthplace if I have them as a client. Otherwise, it's okay to say, hey, I write horoscopes for Eastern Standard Time. This might put things a day or so off for you. Get in touch if you'd like a personalized horoscope. I think that's okay. But this is how to do it if you need to. So now let's talk about, let's go back to out of complication land here, using birthplace again. Let's go back and look at my ephemeris for my reference place because I still live here in the Eastern Standard Time. And I just want to show you why it's useful to do it this way instead of casting a chart for the day. Because you could cast a transit chart for today, for May 19th, and it would give you the positions of the planets, even relative to your birth planets, which is very helpful. But here's why it's helpful to know how to do this. Because now I can see this whole column here of Mercury, where, if I'm writing a horoscope for myself for the month of May, I would say, hey, Mercury is in Taurus at the beginning of the month of May. The second full week in the month of May, it moves into Gemini. Towards the end of the month, it moves into Cancer. And then I can interpret those positions and interpret them across the month. So I'm getting a read for the month instead of looking at a specific day. There's never going to be a point in your career where someone hires you to write them a horoscope for every day. If that happens, it will probably be a publishing deal. Good for you, but it's not going to be a horoscope every day for an individual. It's too much work. Very few people can afford to have an astrologer do that for them. And so what you're going to mostly be looking at when it comes to horoscopy is what is Mercury doing across the month of May and basing your interpretation on that. You'll say in your slot for May 12th, hey, Mercury has moved into Gemini. Here's what that means for looking forward for the next couple of weeks until it moves into Cancer. And that's how you're going to build up a horoscope. You're generally speaking not going to go day by day by day. Even when you are going day by day, though, you want to tell people what's coming next, and you want to tell people where they're coming from. So using these ephemerides really helps you to see the movement of the planets and not just their static positions. Planets move. The word planet means movement, wandering. So you want to represent that in your interpretation. Okay, that's all. I hope this was helpful and not complicated. If it was complicated rather than helpful, bring it up in class and I am happy to clarify. Peace.